I want to talk about this whole Syria issue because the president has changed policy, or actually started keeping his campaign promises, which is an outrage as far as the deep state and the establishment media are concerned, that has resulted in Turkey asserting its security interests in northern Syria. When the president looked at what was going on there and saw that Turkey was going to push and he was not going to get in the way, he's trying to restrain them from going over the top. But I don't recall voting to have American lives on the line for dubious Kurdish organizations that have been designated as terrorists by the United States. Do you? Did you vote for that? I don't think you voted for it. I don't think Congress even voted for it. But we've got American troops there. I mean, Syria is an absolute mess, and it's not a mess because of Donald Trump. Donald Trump has had to clean up the mess created by Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. How do I know that? I'm not just saying that to defend defend Donald Trump. I'm saying it because Judicial Watch has the documents that show it. When perhaps what was, I would say this is, we have a lot of significant work that we do. And our Benghazi lawsuits were because they led obviously to the creation of Select Committee, the truth about what the Benghazi lies that that Obama told us, and the Clinton email scandal. That whole universe of investigation was the most significant, I think remains the most significant non-governmental investigation in American history. And one of the key aspects, one of the key documents that we uncovered, and I think it's arguably the most important thing we've ever found, are documents showing, and this is the headline, Judicial Watch, Defense State Department documents reveal Obama administration knew that Al-Qaeda terrorists had planned Benghazi attack 10 days in advance. The funny thing is, that's not even the most important part of it. This is the most important part. Well, I guess we can argue about what's more important, but we couldn't write enough headlines on these documents. Administration knew, Obama, 3 months before the November 2012 presidential election, of ISIS plans to establish a caliphate in Iraq. Administration knew of arms being shipped from Benghazi to Syria. Okay. They knew and were supporting terrorist movements in Syria opposed to the Assad regime. And we knew arms were being shipped out of Benghazi to support that. And we knew it in such a way that almost certainly, that suggests one of two things, that we were doing it or we could have stopped it. And on top of that, we were warned that we all knew we were supporting the terrorists, or the administration knew, they didn't want to admit it. But also they were warned about the rise of ISIS that we're all supposed to be concerned about, because President Trump has decided, with some evidence, that ISIS has been largely destroyed, and we can end our participation in that region, or at least in that Syria area, or basically allow the Turks to come in and do whatever the Turks need to do to protect themselves. So the documents show, let me talk about the movement of arms from Benghazi to Libya. You know, from Benghazi to Syria. You know, that's a conspiracy theory, folks. Well, it's a conspiracy theory based on a government document that says, let me get here. Weapons from the former Libya, this is a DIA document, Department of Defense Intelligence Agency. By the way, the DIA at the time was being run by General Flynn, and methinks it's because of documents like this that the Obama gang hated him and wanted to put him in jail. Weapons from the former Libya military stockpiles were shipped from the port of Benghazi, Libya, to the port of Benias and the port of Borja Islam, Syria. The weapons shipped during late August 2012 were sniper rifles, RPGs, and 125 millimeter and 155 millimeter howitzer missiles. During the immediate aftermath of and following the uncertainty caused by the downfall of the Gaddafi regime in October 2011, which of course was precipitated by American military might under Barack Obama, which of course caused the murder of Gaddafi. And up until early September 2012, weapons from the former Libya military stockpiles located in Benghazi, Libya, were shipped from the port of Benghazi, Libya. Of course, I've already read that part. The Syrian ports were chosen due to the small amounts of cargo transiting these two ports. The ships used to transport the weapons were medium-sized and able to hold 10 or less shipping cargo containers or cargo. The DIA document further details the weapons shipped from Syria during late August. The numbers for each weapon were estimated to be 500 sniper rifles, 100 RPG launchers with 300 total rounds, and approximately 400 howitzer missiles, 200 each of 125 millimeter and 200 each of 155 millimeter. Okay, guys, if you think the DIA had access to that level of detail without also information about who was doing it in a way that could have been stopped, and of course the KG about who was doing it. It's a passive voice. So we knew Benghazi was, and we're in a position to stop. I mean, if you know the actual numbers to the size of what weapons are being shipped out, the type of ships being used, it seems to me you're in a position to stop it. Or maybe you were involved in it yourself. So there you go. Obama and Hillary Clinton participated in the overthrow of the Gaddafi regime, leading to the murder of Gaddafi, in-rushed the terrorists that turned Libya into a plaything for them. Out of that was, with our knowledge, sent arms to Syria to fund the terrorists who were attacking and trying to overthrow the Assad regime. Now, I'm not a fan of the Assad regime. I'm not a fan of the terrorists. But when you have two terrible enemies of yours fighting each other, why do we come in on one side or the other? And certainly, why would we support Al-Qaeda? You ask, how is it you know, Tom, we were supporting Al-Qaeda? And I say, it's the DIA document that tells me this. And I'm going to read the document. This is the document that was given to us. You'll see it's heavily redacted. It's a DIA document. You see, this is a redaction. The redactors in the government got smart. It always used to be in black, but that looks bad. So now it's in white. So these are redactions. And I'm going to read you the detail here. There's a lot, and we'll put the document up. Internally, and this document is dated in August of 2012. The general situation. This is about Syria. Internally, events are taking a clear sectarian direction. The Salafists, the Muslim Brotherhood, and AQI, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, are the major forces driving the insurgency in Syria. The West, Gulf countries, and Turkey support the opposition, while China, Russia, and Iran support the regime. I want to read that again. The West support the opposition. The opposition is the Muslim Brotherhood and Al-Qaeda. We were supporting the terrorists, guys. AQI, Al-Qaeda in Iraq, supported the Syrian opposition from the beginning, both ideologically and through the media. AQI declared its opposition of Assad's government because it considered it a sectarian regime targeting Sunnis. AQI, I guess, is Shia. AQI conducted a number of operations in several Syrian cities under the name of Jaish al-Nusra, Victorious Army, one of its affiliates. AQI, through the spokesman of the Islamic State of Iraq, ISI, one of the progenitors to ISIS, declared the Syrian regime as a spearhead of what he is naming Jibha al-Afad, forefront of the Shiites, because of its declaration of war on the Sunnis. Additionally, he was calling on the Sunnis in Iraq, especially the tribes in the border regions, to wage war. We're supporting all of these guys. AQI considers the Sunni issue in Iraq to be faithfully connected to the Sunni Arabs and Muslims. The borders between Syria and Iraq stretch approximately 600 kilometers with complex terrain consisting of a vast desert, mountain ranges, joint rivers, and agricultural lands. So 600 kilometers, what does that translate into in miles? A little less than 300, hundreds of miles. It's a vast desert, lacks transportation routes, and what was going on is the Syrians were pulling back from the border. The Iraqi government was incapable of policing the border, and there was this no man's land in which a vacuum into which the terrorists were flowing into. Out of Benghazi, out of Libya, in Iraq, and obviously mobilizing the terrorist movements in Syria as well, with the support of the Obama administration, the West. Development of the current, then this is the crux here. The future assumptions of the crisis. The regime will survive and have control over Syrian territory. The regime will survive. The regime will survive. In 2012, the Defense Intelligence Agency was telling the Obama administration the regime will survive. And yet we spent billions trying to kick it out. Displaced tens and hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, the Syrians, the Syrian government, they're butchers. I understand that. But don't you want to win wars when you engage in them? And shouldn't you acknowledge you're engaging in it before you start supporting terrorists as a front to remove a regime you don't like? Development of the current events into a proxy war. Here, the proxy war that I warned about. With support from Russia, China, and Iran, the regime is controlling the areas of influence along coastal territories and is fiercely defending Homs, which is considered the primary transportation route in Syria. On the other hand, opposition forces, the terrorists that we were arming and supporting, are trying to control the eastern areas. Again, near the border at Iraq. In addition to neighboring Turkish borders. Surprise, surprise, the Turks were upset about what was going on their border. Similar to what transpired in Libya when Benghazi was chosen as the command center of the temporary government. They're trying to do in Syria what they did in Benghazi or in Libya. That's what the Obama administration was doing. They were supporting terrorist groups in Libya to overthrow the Gaddafi regime, and they're trying to do it again in Syria. This document shows it. If the situation unravels, which it did, there is the possibility of establishing a declared or undeclared Salafist principality in eastern Syria. And this is exactly what the supporting powers to the opposition want, in order to isolate the Syrian regime, which is considered the strategic depth of the Shia expansion. So they're trying to keep, and instead what happened is, you had, well, I'll read further. The deterioration of the situation has dire consequences on the Iraqi situation are as follows. This creates the ideal atmosphere for AQI Qaeda Iraq, to return to its old pockets in Mosul and Ramadi, and will provide a renewed momentum under presumption of unifying the jihad among Sunni Iraq and Syria, and the rest of the Sunnis in the Arab world against what it considers one enemy. The dissenters, the dissenters, their opponents in the Syrian regime. ISIS could also declare an Islamic State through its union with other terrorist organizations in Iraq and Syria, which will create grave danger in regards to unifying Iraq and the protection of its territory. And then there's this other point, the renewed facilitation of terrorist elements from all over the Arab world entering into the Iraq arena. That was foreseeable. All of this was foreseeable. Syria collapsed. It was only the Russians rushed in, the Iranians rushed in to support the Syrian regime. ISIS emerged. We had the terrorist threat from that as a result. Hundreds of thousands of refugees that the Turks are having to deal with, but of course that's rarely talked about. Again, the Turkish regime, obviously, it's problematic. Erdogan's no friend of the United States, but technically he's an ally because he's in NATO, the country. We obviously have interests with Turkey that we've thought significant enough to allow them into NATO. The terrorist mess and the Russia footprint in Syria, the Iranian increased footprint in Syria, the rise of ISIS, all foreseen by this document, uncovered by Judicial Watch. So everyone attacking Trump after he spent and was convinced to continue the Syrian campaign that was started illicitly by Obama and Clinton as they played games in nation building and regime change in the Middle East. That's the truth about Syria. So if you don't like the results of what's happening today, blame Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. That's what this document shows. And I spent the time going through it because the media will never tell you about it. They think history begins. They hate history, actually. The left hates history. The left is the enemy of memory. The left is the enemy of history. The left is the enemy of facts. The left is the enemy of truth. Because they need to be able to do whatever they want, whenever they want, and they never want to be held to account. That's what's happening in Syria, and Trump's taking it on the chin for getting out of that morass. We have the documents.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch all the latest news from Judicial Watch.